Hello, everyone. Welcome to 4 Steps to Improve Healthcare Team Effectiveness. My name is Nicole Bendley, and I am so excited to spend the next hour with you. I am the president of K&Co, and we've been helping healthcare teams and leaders to tap the best of themselves for over 30 years. And I specifically have been working in the industry for 20 years now. And so I'm excited to share our research and model in improving healthcare team performance with you. Now, before we get into all of the great content and tools that I'll be sharing with you today, I want to start with some housekeeping. This webinar is being recorded and will be shared with you after the session. There are also handouts in your dashboard that I will be referring to as we move through the session. If you don't have them for whatever reason, email me and I will send them to you after. If you happen to be watching the recording of this, email me. My email address is on the slide, and I will send you the handouts as well. Feel free to ask questions. I'll keep an eye on the chat box. I want this to be as interactive as possible. And to achieve that, I'll also be asking some questions through some polls. Okay, so let's get started just with a little bit about us so that you know who we are and you have the confidence that the model that we'll be sharing with you today and the tools we'll be sharing with you today have been created based on our research and healthcare performance, healthcare team performance over the past 35 years in our work with teams and leaders of all sorts of industries, but in particular with teams of leaders in healthcare. We work with a number of different kinds of healthcare organizations. Some are university medical schools, some are health systems, some are hospitals, and we work with them in a variety of ways. Some use our books, which I'll be speaking to in a minute. Some use our healthcare team tools, our online tool, and some use us in particular to come in and lead team and leadership development on their behalf. So we support organizations in a variety of ways. I mentioned the books. Our models and tools have been published in almost a dozen books over the years. Our most recent book, Improving Healthcare Team Performance, is required reading at a number of universities across North America. And it is in this book where we share our research and our healthcare team model and process that we will be sharing with you today. So I let you know that so that you know that what we'll be sharing with you today is being taught at some universities and used by health leaders around the world to improve the performance of their teams. So a little bit of background as far as the research that drove where we are now. In the 80s, back when team building was a buzzword and it was new, our founder, Leslie Bendley, defined the practices of a high-performance team. She was working with many teams in the 80s that were high-performing, mediocre, or struggling. And so she really wanted to understand what made those high-performing teams high-performing. And she identified that those high-performing teams demonstrated a core set of practices that other teams didn't. And when she enabled and supported struggling and mediocre teams to apply these core practices, their performance improved very quickly. Their team dynamics improved, their relationships improved, and when they maintained those practices and behaviors consistently over time, their results improved over time, and they were able to sustain improved performance. And so, that model was published in 2 books in the late 80s and early 90s. And then in the mid 90s, we tested and revised that team framework and updated it to reflect the changing needs of teams in the changing world that they were working in. And then in 2004, we had a great opportunity to work with a healthcare organization in Canada where we were asked to define what a patient safety culture looked like and to develop an assessment to measure patient safety culture. And that resulted in a patient safety culture assessment that's now being used in over 300 healthcare organizations across North America. And it was through that work where we began to ask the question, are healthcare teams different? Because up until that point, we used our standard team framework and assessment for all sorts of teams. We assumed a team was a team was a team, regardless of whether they worked in a bank or whether they were in a hospital. And it was through this research, this year-long research project, that we discovered, of course, healthcare teams are unique. Healthcare teams work in high reliability organizations. They have unique stressors, unique systems, very complex systems, unique hierarchies. And so they do need to demonstrate a unique set of behaviors and practices that other teams don't. And so it was through that work and through our next research project, where we were asked to define what effective communication looks like in healthcare, that we then identified those practices of a high-performance healthcare team. And those practices have been published in our book, Improving Healthcare Team Performance, and are now being taught in universities and used by health organizations around the world. And so it is based on this research. This research is what drove where we are now and the model that I'm sharing with you and the process that I'm sharing with you today. Okay, so that's a little bit about us. Now let's talk about you, what you're going to walk away with today. So you're going to walk away with an understanding of those behaviors and practices that differentiate high-performance healthcare teams from the rest. You're also going to get those 4 steps to improve healthcare team effectiveness. What is the process that you need to apply? You're going to get strategies to avoid the biggest mistakes in team development. So one of your handouts is those biggest mistakes. Okay, so I'll be referring to that throughout the broadcast. You're going to get tools and techniques for sustaining positive behavior change. And I'm going to be introducing you to the Healthcare Team Fitness tool. This is a tool that I co-created that automates these 4 steps for you. Okay, rest assured, you're going to be able to walk away applying these 4 steps on your own. You'll have the tools and knowledge to do so at the end of this broadcast. But this tool that I'll be introducing you to automates it and allows you to do it more efficiently, more quickly, in a very meaningful way across the organization. Okay, so we'll be popping into that tool throughout the webinar so you get a sense of what it is. Now, I'd like to start with a quick poll before we jump into the content. And this poll will really help me to get clear on who's attending today, so I get a sense of how I can tailor the conversation or the learning for you. So I'm going to launch this first poll. Here we go. And this is asking you, what is your role within your organization? So if you could please let me know whether you work in HR, OD, or learning, whether you lead a team outside of OD, HR, and learning, or if you represent another role within the organization. I'd really appreciate that. So I'm going to launch that. Sorry, I'm going to launch that now. I'm going to give it a few seconds for everybody to answer. I see the results coming in. Okay, good. It looks like we have a very good mix of people. About 50% of you work in HR, OD, or learning. Quarter of you lead a team outside of OD, HR, or learning, and a quarter of you represent other areas within the organization. Thank you so much for sharing that. I appreciate it, and welcome. All right, so let's jump in. This is the question that has driven our work, that has lit a fire within us at K&Co to really understand as a means to best support the healthcare teams we work with. And this question is, what's the difference between healthcare teams that achieve exceptional results with ease and those that struggle to keep up? And what we found through our work and research with healthcare teams is that those that demonstrate a core set of behaviors and practices consistently will deliver better care, will create better staff experiences, will have greater joy at work, will feel safe, will be able to communicate effectively, will be able to bring their best selves to work every day and be there for their patients or the clients that they serve. And so we mapped these core behaviors and practices to these 7 areas that we have defined as essential to high-performance healthcare teams. So healthy climate, cohesiveness, shared leadership, the way we learn together, our ability to communicate, our ability to manage change, our ability as individuals to contribute and move the team forward to deliver even better care. These are all areas that drive teamwork. And so before we get into the 4-step process, it's important for you to get clear on what exceptional teamwork looks like. Because what we know is one of the biggest stumbling blocks to exceptional team development, one of the biggest mistakes organizations make, is not having a clear definition of what high-performance teamwork looks like within the organization. And so it's like shooting darts blindfolded at a bullseye. You're not going to hit the mark. If you do, it's by luck. And you'll be spinning your wheels and not really knowing where your team is at or where it should be. And so having a very clear picture of what high-performance teamwork looks like is where you need to start. And so in your handouts, I've shared with you all the details associated with each of these 7 elements. And I'm going to go through them with you at a high level so you have a basic understanding of what high-performance healthcare teams look like that will inform the process that you're going to be participating in. Okay? I'm not saying to you that this is the framework you absolutely have to use, that you absolutely have to use this definition of high-performance teams. We do know, though, based on our many years of research and the fact that so many universities are using this model to teach future health leaders and practitioners, that this model works and it's recognized, which is why we want to share it with you. So let's start with healthy climate. Healthy climate is the foundation of a healthy, high-performing team. A healthy climate is one in which people feel free to be themselves because there is trust and respect within the team. There is an environment of openness. People know that their team members have their backs. People know that they can speak up and ask questions without fear of reprisal. They feel psychologically safe. Okay, the climate feels welcoming. It feels good to be a member of the team. When they leave work, they feel energized. If they feel depleted, it's because they had a tough caseload. It's not being depleted by their team members in any way. In fact, healthy climates reduce stress and create greater support for one another. Okay, so healthy climate is essential. The next element is cohesiveness, right? This is the degree to which team members are pulling together in the same direction towards a common goal, right? It requires team members to be connected to purpose and meaning, that they have a shared purpose, a shared calling to achieve that purpose, right? Where they respect and understand one another's roles, especially in interprofessional teams where they're able to leverage each other's unique skill sets and talents in the best interest of that patient, right? They're able to overcome individual differences and pull together in the best interest of the patient. In cohesive teams, people know what the top 3 priorities are that they need to be focused on in order to achieve the goal. They know how they fit in the broader system, right? Their team goal aligns with the broader vision of the organization and also into the community. There's an understanding of how they fit into the system. So cohesiveness is essential in high-performing healthcare teams. This next element, shared learning, this really stood out in our research as more important in healthcare teams. In corporate teams, this comes out as innovative thinking, innovation, being highly competitive. In frontline care teams, though, this comes through as learning, right? Learning with and from one another for the purpose of improving how we deliver care, for the purpose of improving our understanding of our practice, right? For the purpose of learning from errors in a blame-free, what can we learn from this manner, as opposed to a punitive manner or a blame manner, right? Shared learning requires looking at how we can improve our service delivery together. In order for learning to happen, there needs to be intention. We need to be asking questions. We need to be sharing knowledge. We need to be coming together and learning from mistakes safely. The next element is change compatibility, and you experience this every day. The volume of change is increasing every day, and the pace of change is increasing. And so teams' ability to be open to change and responsive and flexible in times of change is critical. So does your team demonstrate a positive attitude towards change, whether or not they agree with the change, right? Are they looking for ways to support one another through change? Are they looking for ways to make the change work regardless of whether they agree with it or not? A team's ability to implement change and be responsible and resilient in times of change affect their performance and their levels of stress and wellness as well. Open communication is, of course, important in any kind of team. In healthcare in particular, this stands out because of its impact on harm events. We know that the majority of harm events are caused due to miscommunication or lack of communication. And so when it comes to communicating effectively within a healthcare team, this requires people having the ability to communicate their point of view, to speak up, to ask questions without fear of reprisal, right? If they see an error happening or somebody maybe not following protocol, the comfort level to speak up, regardless of the level of authority of the other person, is critical. The ability to communicate respectfully with one another and openly to create dialogue is critical. Our ability to communicate within the hierarchy is critical. And our ability to communicate accurately in a timely manner is critical. So all of those components go into open communication and are essential to healthcare team performance. Shared leadership is the next element, and this speaks to team members sharing the responsibility for the success of the team, for the delivery of care, and for the effectiveness of the team. And in order for team members to share responsibility, the leader needs to step back and enable others to take on more, empower the teams to take on more. And that requires the leader genuinely asking for input and coaching and enabling others to take on responsibilities and participate in decision making. That also requires the team members to take the initiative to solve problems on their own, to share ideas, and just demonstrate that they are accountable and responsible for the effectiveness of the team. And then finally, team members' contribution. This really speaks to the level of engagement within the team. Are your team members taking the initiative to do what needs to be done without waiting to be asked, right? Are they focused on what's best for the patient and the team versus instead of what's best for themselves? Do they look to offer help to their colleagues and teammates without waiting to be asked? So this really looks at the level of engagement within the team. So those are the 7 areas of a high performance team. And I share these with you so that you get a clear picture of what that looks like, and because one of the biggest mistakes that organizations make is not having a clear picture. And so each team approaches things differently when they try to improve, and there's no real goal as far as what they're aiming for from a team performance perspective. Having clarity in what we're aiming for is essential in any type of initiative, in particular developing teams. Okay, we're going to jump into the process now, and it's important to keep this in mind. Team development is a process. It is not an event. Team development does not happen in one workshop, in one lunch and learn, in one offsite rah-rah, let's build camaraderie and have some fun together. Team development happens over time. And so if you're looking for a quick fix, a process to use in one session, then this is not the webinar for you. treating team development as an event is actually will take your teams backwards as opposed to forward. When we treat team development as an event and assume that things can be fixed in one workshop, this will create frustration and disengagement because your team members will leave that workshop with some optimism and excitement around the potential for change, right? Maybe this will really work this time, and they might see change in behavior for a week or two, but eventually people will revert back to old behaviors and processes and practices, and that will create frustration and distrust in team development and in the leader and in HR and OD. So my recommendation to you is if there's not a process to support team development, do not do it because the risks of negative impact is too great. So having said that, let's look at the process. The first step is to get crystal clear, then get your team fanatically focused, then enable ongoing team action and accountability, and then finally check in and repeat. We're going to be going through each of these 4 steps together. Okay, now before we do that, I want to ask this next poll. Okay, which is, what are your biggest team development challenges? And please check all that apply. Okay, is it achieving sustained change in team behavior? Is it a lack of time and resources? Is it ensuring the team maintains momentum? Is there too much reliance on HR or OD to fix the problem? Is it knowing exactly how to help my team? Okay, so check all that apply. Okay. Okay, I'm going to close it. All right. Oh, it looks like we have a tie. The majority of you are experiencing challenges in achieving sustained change in team behavior and in knowing exactly how to help your team, right? And lack of time and resources. Those are the 3 top challenges that you all say you're facing. A couple of you, too much reliance on HR OD to fix the problem, that leaders come to you, saying, I need you to come in, swoop in and deal with this with my team, a reactionary approach. And a couple of you ensuring the team maintains momentum, which is aligned to achieving sustained change in team behavior. So thank you for that. Okay. Great. So let's address those challenges. These four steps and the team model that I just shared, those 7 elements, will address those challenges for you. Now, I will also be hopping into the healthcare team fitness tool, like I said earlier, throughout this webinar, because this allows you to automate those 4 steps within your organization very easily. And by using this tool, you're going to save 40 hours of development time per team. So if you're in OD or HR, this saves you your needs assessment time, your curriculum design time, your planning time. It does it all for you. And this will help you improve team performance in as little as 30 days. And it's ridiculously cost effective. Every time I look at that number, I can't believe it. Only $75 per team member. So you have a team of 10, $750 for that team to improve its performance in 30 days. So it's a really powerful tool. I'm going to hop into it throughout the workshop or throughout the webinar. Rest assured, though, you can apply everything I'm giving you today without this tool. Okay, this is just a little bonus if you want to automate it. Okay. All right. So let's start with the first step. Get clear. And by getting clear, I mean define what a high-performance healthcare team looks like. Like I said, one of the biggest mistakes is that there's no clear definition within the organization of what teams are striving for. How can you improve performance if you don't know what high performance looks like? Okay, you'll be spinning wheels and trying to improve this, but that doesn't really work. Or maybe we should improve this, but it's not really having an impact. Creates frustration at the leadership level, at the team level. OD ends up wasting time. Get clear. Not only will it help each individual team ensure they know what they're trying to achieve together, but it will create common language across the organization. So when teams partner together or team members come together on committees, they're all working towards, striving towards the same experience and productivity and behaviors associated with high performance teamwork. Okay, so that we need to have consistency across the organization. So I've shared with you the model of what a high performance healthcare team looks like using the healthcare team fitness model, the 7 elements, right? So my recommendation to you from an HROD perspective, for those 50% of you on the call today, share those 7 elements with your team, with your colleagues in HR and OD. You have in your handouts an overview of those 7 elements and create a dialogue around them. Simply ask, how are these 7 elements aligned with our work and our vision and how we want to support our stakeholders within the organization? How can we better align our OD and HR work to these 7 elements? Then have a common question, a question around how you approach team development. Do you usually treat it as an event or as a process? And then what can we begin to do differently in how we approach our work? Now, for those of you who are not in HR and OD, you're going to have a similar conversation with your teams in this next step. So we're going to get there. I haven't forgotten about you. Okay? So that's the first step. Get clear on what exceptional teamwork looks like. And as a leader, before you introduce this to your team, it's important for you to get clear on what exceptional teamwork looks like. And you have a sense from your perspective of where your team is thriving and where they're struggling within those 7 elements. This next step is all about getting your team fanatically focused on what a high performance team looks like, okay, on those 7 elements. And creating a dialogue with the team so that they can identify, how do we measure up against these 7 elements? What do we do really well? What are our strengths that we can celebrate? Where are opportunities for improvement? And based on that, where will we focus our attention first? So teams can become, and leaders can become, so overwhelmed because they don't know where to start, right? Or how to help their team. And they can be overwhelmed by thinking, oh my gosh, we need to work on all of these 7 areas. No, that's not the point. The point is to get fanatically focused on one area to start with and be committed and focused on improving that area over a period of time. So that's what this step in this process does. So let's go through it together. Before we get into it, it's important to remember, for team development to work, it must be done by the team, not to the team. This is so essential because one of the biggest mistakes is that HR or OD sweeps in and positions it as, you know, we understand you need to improve your communication. So here's a training session, or here's the process you're going to go through, right? Or the leader comes in and says, I can see we're struggling here. We need to focus on this, and here's the process. For team development to work, the team needs to have ownership in the design and in the participation and in the needs identification. Their voice needs to be heard throughout the process. They need to take part in co-designing this process so that they feel this is for them, by them, and not being done to them. So this is how the process that you're going to be gaining is designed to enable the team to lead it. So the first step in getting fanatically focused, okay, the first step in the team development process is bringing your team together to introduce the process and get their input and engagement in it, right? So clarify, bring them together. And I understand it's hard to bring the whole team together in healthcare at once. You may need to have multiple 15-minute meetings, you know, at shift change or what have you to get your whole team. But the way in which a process is kicked off will affect the success of the process going forward. So this is a really important step. So clarify, bring them together to clarify the purpose of team development. Okay, this is not punitive, right? Link it to the needs of the team, link it to the vision of the organization, link it to shared meaning around co-creating the experience that we all want to have together in the team, link it to the team's ability to improve how they work together and create the culture they will be proud of, link it to something that is future-oriented and positive and leverages the team's participation in that and addresses team needs. You're going to review the team development process that I'm sharing with you today, and then you're going to create some dialogue about it. You're going to ask the team to identify what they want to achieve through it. What does a positive team development experience look like for you? In order for this process to be worthwhile, what needs to happen? Ensure you capture that feedback and include it in the process so that they feel that this is being done for them and by them. It's also important to clarify team member responsibility within the process, right? So that this success of this doesn't just rest on you, the leader's shoulders, or HR's shoulders, or OD's shoulders. This should be the team's responsibility. So what do you expect of them? They need to participate, for example, and show up and do the work, okay? And then identify the next steps in the process. What can they expect next? All right? So what they can expect next is their very first team development session, which is all about getting fanatically focused. So in this session, hopefully you have a half hour at least to bring the team together. In this session, this is where they get focused and clear on what a high performance team looks like in healthcare. So you're going to share the 7 elements with them. Then you're going to create a dialogue by asking some powerful questions. What resonates with you from this model? What do we do well? Which elements are we thriving in? Are we strong in? Where can we improve? And why is it important to improve in those areas? Okay, so create a dialogue so that they can see themselves in this model and they can create meaning and create a connection to it. Then get fanatically focused and ask, which element should we focus on first to improve and why? Okay, identify one element. Then get specific, start to drill down. What do we need to do to improve this element? What do we need to start doing? What do we need to stop doing? What do we need to do more of? Okay, get specific, capture their ideas on a flip chart. If people don't feel comfortable speaking up, have them write down ideas, capture, and then bring them forward so you can share them. And then identify at least 2 or 3 things that the team is going to actually commit to doing from that list. Have them identify what the next steps are and how they feel they can maintain momentum and hold each other accountable. So this is the structure of your Get Fanatically Focused meeting. This gets your team. This is not about you, the sage on the stage, telling them where you think they're strong, where you think they need to improve, and what they're going to do going forward. This is coming from your team. They're designing what they believe they need to work on and how. Okay? Now this quote, what gets measured gets improved, is one of my favorite quotes because it's just so simple and clear, but it's also so true. So in a sense, in this session, you are measuring. The team is measuring themselves against those 7 elements from a qualitative perspective, right? Through dialogue. They're identifying what they're doing well and what they need to improve upon. You can also measure the team by using an assessment, okay? And this is where we're going to hop into the healthcare team fitness tool for a second. This includes a team assessment a 35-question assessment that takes 10 minutes to complete so that you can hop into the tool, send out this assessment to your teams. Each team member completes it online in a completely anonymous way. So it's completely safe for them to express their true perspective on how the team is performing within each of those 7 elements, right? So that they can give their true voice and be honest in assessing the team. And it takes less than 5 minutes for you to send out the assessment, and it takes no more than 10 minutes for team members to complete it. So in under 15 minutes of time and effort, you have reliable assessments and results of how your team is performing against those 7 elements. So you, the leader or OD specialist, can hop in and see, here's where the team is doing well, and here's where they believe they need to improve. And your data, your results and reports are generated automatically, so you can see how well the team feels they're doing in each of the 7 elements. And you now have a report to bring to your first Get Fanatically Focused meeting, where the team can identify and celebrate the areas that they do really well in, based on feedback from every team member, right? So this team, for example, believes that they demonstrate consistent care practices across the team. They're doing really well there. They believe roles and responsibilities are clearly defined and accepted. They know they can depend on each of their team members. They feel good about being a member of this team. Those are areas that the team can immediately hone in and celebrate. They can also immediately take a look at where their team overall feels they need to improve. This team identified that they really need to take time to reflect on and discuss how to improve their care practice and service delivery and team effectiveness, right? They also identified they need to improve how they're managing change. And so by having team members complete an assessment ahead of time, not only is it giving you data to measure the team with against over time, but it's creating awareness and learning in advance of the first team session. So even the act of just completing this assessment is creating learning and awareness for each team member as they read these questions and answer them. And so they're coming into that Get Fanatically Focused session prepared and ready to discuss those 7 elements and jump into celebrating where they do well and identifying opportunities for improvement. So it saves you time and gives you real, measurable insight into how the team sees itself. There's also opportunity for anonymous comments with open-ended question at the end of the assessment, where team members can give even more perspective so that you have the why behind the data. And then finally, you also have your facilitator guide that gives you the questions to ask, the script, and the handouts for the team to use to create meaning from those 7 elements and their assessment. So you have the facilitator guide and handouts and PowerPoint slides to use for your Get Fanatically Focused session. Okay? So regardless of whether you use the healthcare team fitness tool or you use the model on its own to create dialogue, that session is essential to pave the way for sustainability. So regardless of what you use to facilitate that session, it's important that this session creates awareness of the behaviors and practices most essential to team performance. So choose a model, whether you use our model or another model. Be sure you have a definition of exceptional teamwork that teams are striving for. Make sure that first session speaks to and gives opportunity for teams to identify strengths and areas for improvement. Make sure it creates time for dialogue and meaning around the framework that you're using. Make sure your session allows for clarifying expectations and identifying those non-negotiable behaviors that need to start showing up to be an even better team and to thrive more and struggle less. okay? And ensure that the team is walking away with a process and set of tools to enable ongoing action and accountability, which takes us into the next step. So in your handouts, in your dashboard, you have these slides, okay, copies of these slides. So you can use this as a checklist for creating your first fanatically focused session. Okay. I have a question here from Jim. Yes, Jim, you can get a sample of the team assessment, and I'll share how you can get that at the end of our webinar. Thanks for asking. Okay, great. So next, let's go into the third step, which is enabling ongoing team action and accountability. So sustainable team development requires the team having the right tools to enable ongoing dialogue and action. And I mentioned tools a minute ago, so let's talk about what those tools are. So team tools include exercises. Okay, they can be short 10-minute exercises, you know, a riddle or a quote or a story or a case study, an exercise that creates dialogue, reflection, awareness, learning, and ultimately action. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit more about those in a minute. Team tools can also be questions that spark dialogue, right? And ideally, the questions that you're asking are related to the element that they're focused on. And team tools need to be easy to use by the team and can be applied during everyday work, right? In order for team development to be sustained, it needs to be incorporated into everyday work. It can't just be happening at offsites or retreats. It needs to be happening regularly within the regular course of the team's work. So let's say the team identified a need to strengthen cohesiveness. So here are some questions to ask. You can ask these questions within a huddle. You can ask these questions within a regular team meeting. Okay? How do we define success as a team? What is our ultimate goal? Ask this question and see what comes up, and use the feedback to create that success statement, that goal that your team is working towards. What top 3 priorities should we be focused on to achieve our goal, right? Get a sense of how aligned are your team members to the priorities. Is everybody working on the same priorities, or are we pulling in different directions? What should our priorities be? What should we be focused on this month or this quarter or this year in order to achieve our vision? How do we ensure we're fanatically focused on our priorities and our goal? How do we keep each other accountable to this? How do we stay motivated and connected to our purpose? So when your team identifies the element it's going to focus on, give some thought to the questions you can begin to ask in your team meetings that will create dialogue and improvement in behavior and action around that element, given the needs. Another way to create momentum and to use the tools is to create a champion team. Some healthcare teams are quite large, and most of the healthcare teams we work with create champion teams who own the team development process in partnership with OD or in partnership with the leader. So a champion team is a group of individuals, you know, 2, 3, or 4, depending on the size of the team, who really believe in team development, who are passionate and committed to helping the team to improve. And they own this process, the sustainability process. So they're responsible for gathering the tools to use or using the tools that you from OD or HR give them. They use them in huddles and meetings and lunch and learns. So they're making sure momentum is maintained and these tools and questions are getting asked. And they keep the team focused on how we're working together, right? They're the ones who are carving out time in team meetings to make sure that dialogue around team performance is happening. They're the ones making sure they're asking provocative, powerful questions in team huddles to focus on how we're working together. Okay, so they're owning the process, so it doesn't just rest on the leader or on HR. Now, jumping back into the tool actually generates all of your team tools for you, all of your team development exercises, targeting the greatest areas of need for your team. So this team, through their assessment, they identified climate, learning, communication, and change as the 4 areas that received the lowest scores out of all 7. So the system generates team development exercises targeting all of these areas. So for example, if you open up climate, you will have 5 different exercises to choose from, varying in length, anywhere from 15 minutes to an hour and a half. You have facilitator guides and handouts, and if applicable, PowerPoint slides. And so let's say your team identifies it needs to improve climate, or maybe it's identifying it wants to start with learning. You can hop into your tool and you have everything you need to address that opportunity for improvement, to give your team the tools it needs to incorporate into their team meetings, into their group huddles. Or if you're in OD and HR, you have all of the curriculum designed for you, so you can create a full day session, a lunch and learn, a half day session, 2-day sessions. You have 2 days worth of content here to draw from. So you can share some of this content with the team, the champion team, to use within their huddles and team meetings, and you can use the content to create longer workshops to use throughout the process to maintain momentum. This is really where that 40 hours of development time, the assessment, and these exercises, you are saved a ton of time. And it's only $75 per team member. And you can reuse these exercises. Okay, so here's an example. We handhold you through these exercises, so you do not need to be an expert facilitator. You can be a physiotherapist who's never facilitated a session in your life, and use this exercise to create dialogue, to create awareness, to create action within the team to improve, right? So here's an example. This exercise uses a quote. It's not what happens to us in life that creates our experience, but how we respond to what happens. Then you're prompted to ask this question: what does this quote mean to you? Then you're given a variety of responses that usually are shared by other team members. Then you're prompted to ask, how does this quote apply to managing change? So this is an example of an exercise that relates to the change compatibility element. So if change compatibility has been identified as the first area to start, go into the change compatibility element within your tool and pull out the exercises that you feel will be most helpful. We have developed all of the exercises on here. We continue to develop them. Nothing goes on the tool that has not been tested with teams, so we know, in healthcare teams, so that we know they work. And every exercise is designed to spark awareness, dialogue, reflection, and action. And so if you are sourcing your own team tools, be sure that they meet these criteria. Okay, so that there is in particular dialogue happening within the team around a particular learning opportunity or performance opportunity. Okay, now we talked about tools, but sustainable team development also requires a structured process, right? So let's look at that process. A sustainable process includes dedicating time for the team to have dialogue around the area that they're improving every month. So schedule time in a monthly team meeting to focus on how the team is working together. Schedule time in huddles. Use powerful questions to spark dialogue and awareness within huddles. The question can be as simple as, what did we do well last week? What do we need to do differently this week? Okay, the question doesn't need to be difficult. It can be a simple question that focuses the team's attention on recognizing what it's done well and where it needs to improve. Thirdly, have a quarterly check-in. Now, these quarterly check-ins are longer. If HR and OD, if you're supporting a team, check in with the leader every quarter to see how it's going. What type of support do they need? What's working, what's not? Be there as a thought partner for that leader. And have a quarterly check-in with the team. If the champion team is leading this process, they can lead a lunch and learn, for example, an hour session. Maybe OD is going to lead that hour quarterly check-in. Maybe the leader leads it. Regardless of who leads it, have a longer session that is the entire time is dedicated to focusing on that element and improving that element or checking in on that element that the leader and team have committed to. And you can, if you're using the team fitness tool, there are a number of hour-long, 45-minute long exercises to draw from that you can use quarterly. The goal, though, for a sustainable process, ideally, there is dialogue and focus that's happening within those 3 months. It's not just every quarter we come back to check in. We're having this dialogue regularly through the course of our everyday work. And then have a biannual check-in, and ideally you're using an assessment. Okay, so you can assess yourselves through dialogue, like I said. You identified 6 months ago where your strengths were through your Get Fanatically Focused session. You identified your opportunities for improvement. You come back together and say, okay, where are we now? Are these areas still strong? Have we improved in any area? And if you're using a team assessment, you would then reassess using the assessment so you have evidence there. You have data to show how you've progressed. That biannual check-in is important, which leads us to that fourth step. This is the check-in and repeat biannually, right? Where you're coming in to ask, where are we now? What can we celebrate? And what will we improve on next? So maybe you focused on change compatibility for the first 6 months, right? And now you're at a place where you feel you really are more resilient. You're more open to change. You have evidence to show that. So now it's time, let's focus on where are we going to focus on next? What's the next area for improvement? Or maybe the team still feels they need to stay committed to change. It's fine to stay on the same element for another few months, but get clear on how far you've come, what's gotten in your way, what needs to be different going forward, what are you going to focus on next, and celebrate how far you've come. So in the team fitness tool, you're given a roadmap that leads you through your first 3 months leading up to that 6-month check-in, right? So that you can develop habits around how we're working together and in sustaining that momentum. And in the team assessment and the team fitness tool, you can see when you complete the assessment for the second time, you are able to visually see and have data to support the improvement that the team has made. And you can share that with the team. And when we assess and measure, that communicates that this is a priority. We're assessing ourselves every 6 months. This is a priority for us, right? This isn't just a flash in the pan. We're going to be tracking our performance because how we work together directly affects the quality of care for our patients and the quality of our work life with one another. And from an OD and learning perspective, this also allows you to track and compare teams across your organization. So you can get an idea of what your teams need from a learning perspective. So maybe you notice that multiple teams in the organization are struggling with change compatibility. This would indicate that the leaders might need support and training in change management, and the teams might need some support in building resilience, right? So this tool also allows you to be more proactive and understand the needs of the organization from a learning perspective. So those are the 4 steps. Get clear on what high performance healthcare teams look like. Get your team fanatically focused on what they look like, how they measure up, where their strengths are, what they're going to focus on first. Support them in ongoing action through dialogue and using the exercises in huddles and team meetings. Check in quarterly, have a longer quarterly session. And then every 6 months, reassess where you are and what you're going to focus on next. This is a continuous improvement process that never ends. High performance teams follow this process because they know in order to remain high performing, they need to stick with the program. So, for those of you who would like an invitation to the Healthcare Team of Fitness Assessment, if you would like to try it, to complete the assessment and see the questions that are being asked, send me an email. Happy to send you the assessment to complete. If you would like a sample exercise to use with your team, please email me. I'm happy to share one with you. And feel free to reach out should you like a complimentary consultation on maybe you have a team in need. Happy to be a thought partner on how to best approach that team. Okay, so thank you so much. I wish you all the best of luck and hope to hear from you soon. Take good care.